Hi, everybody. We are continuing with our reading of The Giver today. We will finish chapter 6. That's exciting. We should get some more information, but not quite the information I'm sure you're looking forward to, being Jonas's job assignment. This chapter, we'll learn about it next chapter, but we do get some good stuff this chapter with it wrapping up. Just to refresh, some things we read about yesterday with the first part of chapter 6. Remember, we are now in the ceremony, the first day of the ceremony, and we have gotten through ages 1 through 8, and we get some information about them. Remember, the ones, they get their names and their families. The new children, they're placed in their homes. And we don't get a whole lot of information between the ones in the sevens. But Lily does turn 8 this chapter. That's Jonas's little sister, and we know that she gets her jacket that has pockets now, which is significant because the pockets indicate that she is now mature enough to have her own stuff and to keep track of it herself. And she is also given her volunteer hours too when she turns 8, so that's a huge deal. And we are now in the morning of the ceremony of 12. Before we get there, I forgot to mention, if you recall, we did have the mention of a little 4 whose name was Caleb, who had died in the past, and his parents are now receiving a new baby who is essentially the replacement for the one that had accidentally drowned in the river. So that was pretty significant, and we learned that names are often recycled in this community. So let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. Now Father sat beside Mother in the audience. Jonas could see them applauding dutifully as the 9s, one by one, wheeled their new bicycles, each with its gleaming name tag attached to the back, from the stage. He knew his parents cringed a little, as he did, when Fritz, who lived in the dwelling next door to theirs, received his bike and almost immediately bumped into the podium with it. Fritz was a very awkward child who had been summoned for chastisement again and again. His transgressions, that's a vocab word, remember transgressions are like the breaking of rules, were small ones, always. Shoes on the wrong feet, schoolwork misplaced, failure to study adequately for a quiz, sounds a lot like a lot of the 7th graders we have at Boone Grove. But each such error reflected negatively on his parents' guidance and infringed on the community's sense of order and success. Jonas and his family had not been looking forward to Fritz's bicycle, which they realized would probably too often be dropped on the front walk instead of wheeled neatly into its port. Finally, the 9s were all resettled in their seats, each having wheeled a bicycle outside where it would be waiting for its owner at the end of the day. Everyone always chuckled and made small jokes when the 9s rode home for the first time. "Want me to show you how to ride?" older friends would call. "I know you've never been on a bike before." But invariably the grinning 9s, who in technical violation of the rule had been practicing for several weeks, would mount and ride off in perfect balance, training wheels never touching the ground. Then the 10s. Jonas never found the ceremony of 10 particularly interesting, only time-consuming, as each child's hair was snipped neatly into its distinguishing haircut. Females lost their braids at 10, and males, too, relinquished their long hair and took on the more manly short style which exposed their ears. Laborers moved quickly to the stage with brooms and swept away the mounds of discarded hair. Jonas could see the parents of the new 10 stir and murmur, and he knew that this evening, in the many dwellings, they would be snipping and straightening the hastily done haircuts, trimming them into a neater line. 11s. It seemed a short time ago that Jonas had undergone the ceremony of 11, but he remembered that it was not one of the more interesting ones. By 11, one was only waiting to be 12. It was simply a marking of time with no meaningful changes. There was new clothing, different undergarments for the females whose bodies were beginning to change, and longer trousers for the males, with a specially shaped pocket for the small calculator they would use this year in school, but those were simply presented in wrapped packages without an accompanying speech. Break for midday meal. Jonas realized he was hungry. He and his groupmates congregated by the table in front of the auditorium and took their packaged food. Yesterday, there had been merriment at lunch, a lot of teasing and energy, but today the group stood anxiously, separate from the other children. Jonas watched the new 9s gravitate toward their waiting bicycles, each one admiring his or her name tag. He saw the 10 stroking their new short hair, the females shaking their heads to feel the unaccustomed lightness without heavy braids they had worn for so long. I heard about a guy who was absolutely certain he was going to be assigned engineer, Asher muttered as they ate. The next day, he jumped into the river, swam across, and joined the next community he came to. Nobody ever saw him again. Jonas laughed. Somebody made up that story, Ash, he said. My father said he heard that story when he was a 12. But Asher wasn't reassured. He was eyeing the river where it was visible behind the auditorium. I can't even swim very well, he said. My swimming instructor said that I don't have the right boyishness or something. Buoyancy, Jonas corrected him. Whatever. I don't have it. I sink. Anyway, Jonas pointed out, have you ever once known of anyone, I mean really known for sure, Asher, not just heard about it in a story, who joined another community? No, Asher admitted reluctantly, but you can. It says so in the rules. If you don't fit in, you can apply for elsewhere and be released. My mother says that once, about 10 years ago, someone applied and was gone the next day. Then he chuckled. She told me that because I was driving her crazy. She threatened to apply for elsewhere. She was joking. I know, but it was true. What she said, that someone did that once. She said that it was really true. Here today and gone tomorrow. Never seen again. Not even a ceremony of release. So, we are inching closer and closer and closer towards the 12s getting their job assignments. This includes Jonas, right? And you can imagine what that must feel like, right? This big moment in your life that essentially is going to define it for the rest of theirs, right? Is getting closer, and that anxious feeling is starting to build up. And that's what's happening with this whole interaction between Asher and Jonas when they're at lunch, right? So Jonas even says, it's obvious that all of the 12s are feeling anxious right now for their job assignment. And you can tell that everybody's kind of nervous about, what job they're going to be assigned. And Asher makes the point that, people sometimes don't get what they want, which isn't always true, especially in the community, but that if you are not happy in the community, you have the option to leave. And he gives us that goofy little story, right? So we just learned a huge piece of information, right? If you are not happy with the community that you're in, you have the option to apply for somewhere else, which is a huge deal, but we're going to talk about that more here in a minute. Jonas shrugged. It didn't worry him. How could someone not fit in? The community was so meticulously ordered, the choices so carefully made. Even the matching of spouses was given such weighty consideration that sometimes an adult who applied to receive a spouse waited months or even years before a match was approved and announced. All of the factors, disposition, energy level, intelligence, and interest, had to correspond and to interact perfectly. Jonas's mother, for example, had higher intelligence than his father, but his father had a calmer disposition. They balanced each other. Their match, which, like all matches, had been monitored by the committee for 3 years before they could apply for children, had always been a successful one. Like the matching of spouses and the naming and placement of new children, the assignments were scrupulously thought through by the committee of elders. He was certain that his assignment, whatever it was to be, and Asher's too, would be the right one for them. He only wished that the midday break would conclude, that the audience would re-enter the auditorium, and the suspense would end. As if in answer to his unspoken wish, the signal came, and the crowd began to move toward the doors. All right, so before we get into the notes, so we know that obviously all of the 10s are nervous, and we know obviously they have a right to be, and we just found out that they have the option of moving communities. But Jonas says that that doesn't happen very often, and there's a reason for that, and that comes with the description of how spouses, which again are husbands and wives, are matched up in the community, how they pick your husband or wife. And they have to consider a lot of stuff, right? Remember we talked yesterday that divorce and separation don't happen in this community because they perfectly match you with the right person so that you are a perfect fit for one another. And Jonas gives the example of his parents, right? And they do the same weighty consideration as Jonas said, or where they really sit and think through where they're going to place the new children and also the assignments, right? So having an unhappy person does not happen very often. And that's why our Jonas was kind of, joking around with Asher. They weren't being serious, right? They know that whatever is given to them is supposed to be the right fit for them because the elders have said so. And remember, we don't question the government in dystopian novels because otherwise it upsets everything, okay? So keep that in mind. All right, so I do want to go over the notes that I've added with you really quick before I let you guys go. So if we go back to our bit about release, right? We knew the original 3 ways that you could be released in the community. If you were an elder or somebody living in the house of the old, you are released from old age, and we know that it's supposed to be a celebration. We have the releasing of new children, if they're not growing fast enough and if they're labeled inadequate, as Jonas put it, they're released. And then we have the punishment. If you break rules 3 times, then you are released from the community. And now we have a 4th way, right? You can apply for elsewhere. That should be capitalized, sorry. You can apply for elsewhere if you don't like your community. And so technically you're being released from your original community. And so now we have 4 ways of being released from the original community. I also want to talk about, I made an age timeline for you guys. So just to give you a visual of what age looks like and how the aging process works in the community. So we know that when you turn 1, you get your name and your family, and you are given your comfort object. Obviously, Gabe did not get to participate in that this year, but next year he will. 2 through 4, we don't really know what happens with children in these age groups because Jonas doesn't really get into it, so I just put not available. 4 through 6, we know that girls get their hair ribbons. We also know that boys have long hair in this community until they turn 10. We know that they have back buttoning jackets, which helps teach interdependence. And interdependence is when you have to rely on other people, right? So if your jacket buttons in the back, you have to ask somebody else to help you button up your jacket. And that's important because remember, the community relies on everybody in it for it to run smoothly. Then when you turn 7, you get your front buttoning jacket. And that shows independence, which means that you can do it by yourself. And that's kind of the first time that you can show that maturity and ability to do things on your own. Then we turn 8, just like Lily just did. We get our jacket with the pockets, which again shows that you're mature enough to take care of your own things. And we get our volunteer hours. At the age of 9, we receive our bicycles. 10, we get haircuts, so the boys have shorter hair now and girls lose their hair ribbons, which is pretty significant. 11 is nothing special, we get new clothes. And finally, at the age of 12, we have our job assignment. Folks, if you would like to pause the video at any time to take these notes down, I just want to remind you that you are allowed to use your notes on the test over the book. So I would strongly suggest pausing and writing the notes down as you see them in the video, okay? I do believe that is everything I have for you today. Please make sure that you complete the vocab quiz and that you watch the video and complete the Chapter 6 worksheet. And I believe that's everything. Thanks, guys.